Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is JJ. Today we're going to use the Altenew Sketchy Floral Stamp set as well as the Floral Drape Stencil. We're going to make this Mother's Day card here, and we're also going to cut up some stamps. So here's the Altenew Sketchy Floral Stamp set as well as the Floral Drape Stencil that goes with that stamp set. And we're also going to be using the Simon Says window frame stamp set and the die. Now this came in the February card kit. So I've got some sentiments here. We're going to be cutting up one of those stamps. We're going to be cutting up the Happy Mother's Day stamp. I find it a little long, and I've done this with other stamps as well. So I'm going to cut up the words just so I can position them where I want. And if I want to use them in one line, I can easily put the stamps back together again to do that, or at least line them up. I can't really put them back together though, can I? So let's pull this off. We're going to cut off the happy, and then we're going to cut off day. So you want to be fairly careful when you do this and make sure you're cutting where you need to cut. Right now I'm just cutting off happy, and this was a fairly easy one to cut. There's some spacing between the words that allows me to get my knife in there and cut it. You'll also notice here in a sec that I've got to change my glasses because I have actual crafting glasses, which allows me to see a little bit better. So we're just going to pull off those ones and put on the right ones. And then I can find the day word and cut that right off. Now it doesn't take much to cut most stamps. It depends who makes them, depends on the quality. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try it out, make sure I didn't cut into any of the letters, make sure that this looks good. So I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of paper, grab myself some ink, and see how it looks. And I haven't had any problems doing this yet. I haven't foobarred any of my stamps so far. So this looks really good. Looks great. I'm going to check it one more time because I can. So let's get started. I'm going to grab the Sketchy Floral Stamp set and the Floral Drape Stencil. Now I got both of these in a card kit from Altenew, and I actually purchased it because they had an amazing price on it. And I mean, I liked the stamp and I liked the kit when I got it, but I have to say I really fell in love with this stamp and this stencil after I used it. So this is a huge stamp. It's so big. You can see me struggling to pull it off here because it's so huge. But what I want to do is I actually want to use the stencil and then stamp after I have used my stencil. But I just going to line up my stamp here where I want it on my paper, and then I'm going to line the stencil on top, and I actually have a dry erase marker where I'm going to mark where my paper sits so I can put my paper or my stencil on my paper in that spot, because that's where I want my stamp to sit. And with this dry erase marker, those marks are just going to come off that stencil with a quick wipe. No problem. So I'm just going to use some repositionable tacky spray on the back of my stencil, just because there's some little pieces there that can tend to move. I'll line up those lines I made with my paper, and we'll get to some blending. Now you can see me kind of checking out these blenders because I just got them. I've never used them before, from scrapbook.com, and these are the dome blenders, and I have to say I really like them. They pick up a lot more ink than it looks, and they just glide beautifully over the paper. So I was really impressed with how nice these blend and how well they put the ink down on the paper. And so I definitely knew as soon as I used them I was going to have to get some more. My only concern is storing them, because my other blenders I just store on the bottom of my ink pads. Easy peasy. These ones, they're definitely a bit thicker, not so easy. So anyways, I'm just grabbing some Stormy Sky here. I'm just going to blend that in with that worn lipstick color. Now, I really have no plan here. I'm really just putting down some color, because once you stamp on top of these colors, it looks beautiful. I think you can use any color that you want, and this will just look beautiful. It just comes up beautiful. So far I've tried a few different ways and it just looks great. So anyways, all the colors I used are Worn Lipstick, Squeezed Lemonade, Stormy Sky, Shaded Lilac, and Old Paper. Now I really like these colors just because they're so pastel. So that's what I threw on. Like I said, you can use any color. This just comes out beautifully no matter what you use. Now I had to pull out my large positioner because this stamp is so big. It won't fit on my smaller one. I used some temporary adhesive on the back of the paper just to make sure that stays where it needs to stay. I pulled out my VersaFine Onyx Black ink pad here just because I really want a crisp impression. Now, like I said, I stamp after I put the color down because I've done it the other way around, and it blurs the black, so I don't want that. I want a really crisp impression here. So I'm just gonna put that down, add some pressure, and you're gonna see it just looks so beautiful. I just love this stamp set. And there you have it, a couple of spots missing. Just give it a little bit more pressure. And that's one of the reasons why I used the adhesive on the back of my paper, because I don't want it to move. I always worry that even if I've got it lined up against something else, it's not going to stamp perfect. I do not want that piece of paper to move because I've had that problem. So here it is. I'm going to keep my stamp on my positioner because I do need to stamp another panel in a lighter color. Now, I realize while I'm doing this that I actually want to test that stamp out and see how well I really cleaned off that stamp, because I don't want any black coming onto that page with my pink, because I am using a light pink and it's the Tattered Rose, the Distress Oxide ink Tattered Rose, which I just love this color. It's probably my favorite color. And so far it looks good. Looks like I cleaned my stamp properly. So I'm going to grab my panel, I'm going to put it back down, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp with the Tattered Rose. Now, the only drawback I find with the Oxide inks is that the stamping pad has I guess like a curve in it. So when you're trying to put ink onto your stamps, not all of that stamping pad is making contact while you're doing that, unless you're applying a significant amount of pressure. So you really kind of have to be careful with that. That's really my only complaint on those pads. But other than that, I absolutely love the Distressed Oxides. I haven't had them for very long, and I absolutely fell in love with them right away and wish I wouldn't have waited so long to purchase the Distressed Oxide inks. So all finished with stamping with the Tattered Rose. We'll put that aside, let that dry. Now I'm just going to grab my Simon Says window frames, line that up to approximately where I want it on my main panel. Grab some tape here, get rid of some of that stickiness before I throw it in the machine. Now I've got my 3 squares, and I'm just going to kind of put them on my main panel here, see how they look. They look good, no problem so far, which is good because I've actually never made this card before. This is the first time I'm doing it, so you're kind of going through this with me. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to get some blank squares, because I am going to test my sentiments and their position on those squares before I put them on the stamped ones, just because I don't want to go through all of that again. So here's the Simon Says Stamp window frame stamp set. I am going to end up cutting up one of the stamps in this set as well. So I'll be using two stamps from this set. I'll be using the thank you stamp, and I'll be using the for everything stamp, because I'm going to cut up the for everything stamp so it fits on my square properly. But first we're going to take the thank you stamp. I'm going to grab my VersaFine Onyx Black, and that's what I'm going to be using to stamp with. And we're just going to line that up. Which takes me forever, because these stamps, you know, it can be hard to line them up because they stick to your fingers. So as soon as you move your finger away, it kind of can go with your finger. Anyways, I'll just grab my black ink here. Stamp out my thank you, and if I like this, I can use it on another card at a later date. And yeah, no, looks good. We'll put that aside, and we will grab the square that I do want to use. Make sure that's right side up. Re-ink my stamp and stamp that down. Looks good. Always clean those stamps so there's no black left on them when you go to use a lighter color. Now here I'm going to put down another blank square, and I'm going to grab the for everything stamp, and I'm going to put it down. You can see it's, I mean, yeah, it fits, but it just won't look right. So I'm just going to grab my knife and just separate those. Now this one's a little harder to cut than the ones we did earlier. It's just a little thicker, but we're going to test it out here. And looks good. No issues there. I didn't cut into any of the letters. Looks great. So we'll grab the square with the tattered rose on it and stamp that one as well. Now again, it takes me a long time to line up these little stamps because they stick to your fingers as soon as you move your finger away, and I've tried using a poker and it does the same thing. So it can take some time to really line them up where you want them. So that panel looks good, or that square looks good. And now I've got the Happy Mother's Day. This is the one we cut up earlier, and I'm going to test that out to make sure its position is where I want it on my squares. Now I use a positioner for pretty much every stamp, especially sentiments, small sentiments like this, just because I want to be able to control the amount of pressure that I put on those stamps. Because I find when I use an acrylic block, I always end up putting too much pressure or not enough, and then to go over it again with acrylic block usually doesn't work out well for me. So I almost always put small sentiments on my positioner just so I can control the pressure that's put on top of those stamps. Okay, so we're going to finish off this square, and looks really good. We're going to be able to assemble the rest of the card here. So I'm just taking some double-sided foam tape, putting them on the back of my squares. This is pretty good foam tape too. It's not the Scotch foam tape. I can't remember what it's called. I got it on Amazon, and it's far less expensive than the Scotch tape, because that Scotch stuff is just so pricey. I mean, for such a giant roll. And this was a huge roll I got, and it was literally a fraction of the cost. Now you're going to see me struggling here to get comfortable to put these squares on my panel, but I do eventually figure it out. And the good thing with this double-sided tape is if you put it down, it doesn't really stick. You're able to pull it back up without damaging anything. So I do that a couple of times here. I'm able to put it down and then pick it back up. It really doesn't set until you put some pressure on it. So I'm just going to do the final square here and find that's that sweet spot, and there it is. Okay. So what I noticed on the thank you stamp that I have there is that some of that tattered rose is showing through the black. So I just grab a brush here, dip it onto the stamp, and just kind of add a little bit more ink to a couple of those spots. No big deal. It definitely helped. It wasn't really noticeable. It's probably something I more noticed than anybody else would. So now we're going to take our panel and add it to our card. Now I'm a little bit particular about how my panels line up, so I can sometimes spend way too long lining them up because for some reason they just have to be perfectly lined up. Again, probably something nobody else would notice, but I noticed. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to stamp just a little something on the inside. I'm actually going to grab a stamp from the Remember This stamp set by Altenew. Now, this stamp, it's almost like it didn't belong, or like Altenew didn't know where to put it, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But I'm going to pull it out. It's a pretty little stamp, but I feel like it doesn't go with this stamp set. I don't know why. Again, could just be me not understanding Altenew's stamp set. But we're going to use that. We're going to use the Tattered Rose color again to stamp it. Let's just pull out an acrylic block here. I'm going to test it as well first. I do that a lot. Make sure I like the impression I've got. Make sure I like the color. Make sure I'm happy with the stamp itself before I throw it inside the card. So it looks good. I like it. Let's throw it inside the card. And it just gives it that little extra something that you kind of paid attention to what was going on, not just on the outside of the card, but on the inside of the card. So that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me. And if you haven't noticed, this is my first video, so be gentle in the comments on that. Okay? Thanks for stopping by.